Welcome to the LibreQuest podcast. My name is Matt. This is episode 45. I am joined today by a hardware mod genius, a Linux gamer, and a captain of an Earthship, Jeff from Spec Linux Laptop. How's it going, Jeff?
It's going pretty good.
Good. Firstly, can you explain what an Earthship is and why it's so awesome?
An Earthship is an off-grid home, completely autonomous, which means it provides for its own power. It catches its own water with roof water catch and cisterns. It has the greenhouse is a gray water treatment system, so it treats its own waste, and then you can take that further and treat your black water also. But I'm not going to make black water. I'm going to do a dry toilet of some sort, some kind of composting toilet. I'm not going to make black water.
Very cool. So, what kind of materials do you use in the construction?
So, the walls are tires, which is another, because something needs to be done with all these tires. They're rammed with earth rammed into them. And so like a 235, 75, 15-inch tire will get about 3 wheelbarrow loads of dirt pounded into it. Wow. And so you end up with 29-inch thick rammed earth walls that are encased in rubber, so you can use them below grade. So on my the north side will actually end up when it's done, be buried beyond the height of the tire walls.
Okay, so that's basically it's the foundation and it's the walls.
Yes, it's a monolithic construction that just doesn't. Yeah, it provides for its own foundation.
Okay, I noticed that you'd posted a video. This has been a while back, of the cistern, I believe. Is that still an ongoing project, or is that one completed?
Yeah, it's all a slow, ongoing project. I'm working on it out of pocket. The bank doesn't own anything here. The bank has nothing to do with anything, and that spirit of independence kind of spills over into my computer use.
Yeah, with your choice in operating system, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you know, the history of Earthships? Because I watched a documentary, but I'm not really sure where where when it began, kind of the history of it.
Mike Reynolds started developing them in the 70s. Okay. And if he started developing them now, he probably couldn't be able to do it, because one of the things he did to prove how strong the tire walls were was he built 2 tire walls and made ramps up to them and drove a fully loaded cement truck on the tire walls. Wow. And then he did that in front of the code people to to prove that these are strong. And it's it's experimental housing, but there is code for it, and there is actual code for it. And he's been working on it for over 30 years. He's made legislation for and all kinds of stuff. It's been a long battle for him to actually get this stuff legalized.
Is that something that is, those laws, are they specific to the state where you live?
I'm not sure exactly. I know they have been built in other states. Okay. I'm not sure how many variances you would have to get.
Yeah, so you might, if you were interested in that, you might have to find an area that's friendly or lawfully allows that kind of construction.
Right.
Okay.
And a lot of places are trying to ban roof water catch and stuff. This is come on, it's ridiculous.
What's the reasoning for that?
Well, in California, they think they own all the rainwater, and if you catch it, you're stealing water from the state. Huh. I guess. I don't know. I think it's just for I'm not sure what the reasoning is on that, but
yeah. It's good to know, at least.
So yeah, some places it's a lot different than other places.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any. I live in the state of Texas. I don't know if there's any. I mean, I'm not familiar with the rainwater laws, if there are any. Even it sounds kind of weird, really.
Yeah, it's just over the top control that just is ridiculous.
Yeah. So, Back to the Earth ship. Do you, if you have an Earth ship, does that make you a captain?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Okay. So you're Captain Jeff of the Earth ship. That's awesome, man.
Maybe someday I'll bust a bottle of champagne over it when I figure the
Yeah.
main portion of it's done, which would be the living room and the kitchen and systems room.
Yeah. Just do it. Do a video. I want to see that. That's awesome. That'd be cool. So I know that you do like hardware modifications, and we've talked about it before. Um, like when did you begin doing like as far as like input, like gamepad input,
That
modifications, and that kind of stuff?
that goes all the way back to the Commodore 64.
Wow. Yeah.
And you remember the Commodore 64 took Atari joysticks,
Okay.
and Epix came out with like what summer games and winter games and all that. And on the arcade machine, you pressed buttons, but on the Atari joystick, you rattled the joystick back and forth. And those things weren't very sturdy, and so I'd already opened them up, sliced open the membrane where the uh, where the little bubble contacts were, and I'd clean contacts and like make my Atari joysticks useful again. But when I got that summer games game, I went down to my local Radio Shack and I got like a little metal project box, and I got 5 buttons, and then I used the circuit board of a broken Atari joystick for the wiring diagram, and I made a button controller for playing the Epic summer games, winter games, and stuff like that.
Wow. What did you like solder wire onto the traces on the board for the buttons?
I didn't use the board. I just used
Oh,
the
okay.
board for a wiring diagram.
Oh, that's crazy. So you've been doing this a long, like I'll be
I
honest.
was
Yeah,
never afraid to take something apart and look at it.
yeah. And so you basically you based your design on the original controller, but it was like all your thing.
Yeah, just buttons push buttons just like the arcade machine for instead of uh instead of using the Atari joystick.
Okay. And was that like I never used the Commodore 64. Like I hear people talk about it all the time. I think growing up we had like an Amiga. It was like a small
Oh yeah,
uh,
that was after the Commodore. I sure wanted one of those. Never got one.
yeah, we had one for a short period of time, honestly. But yeah, we did have one of those. But I'm just wondering about the connectors because I know some as far as like I'm more familiar with like GamePort, like from the '90s.
Right.
Um,
And like for the cord, I had broken Atari joysticks because I had when I was a kid, the first console I had was Pong, and
nice.
then we had the Atari 2600, and from there I'd never had another console after that. I went to the Commodore VIC 20 with cassette drive, Commodore 64 with disk drive, and then I went into the Army. And when I came back, I shared a PC compatible with my uncle that ran at the time it wasn't slow, had a whopping 1600 mega or 16 megahertz clock speed on the CPU, and that wasn't slow back then. That was around 90, 91, 91.
I guess it depends on what you're asking it to do, whether it's slow or not, right?
Well, that was an average speed of a
Yeah.
PC at the time for a CPU.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like if what kind of programs are running, what kind of operating system we're using. What yeah, I guess what operating system were you using? Was like a DOS machine?
Well, I played around in Apple in high school. I would go to the library during study hall and play around on the Apple IIs, and we used a little bit of DOS on the PC compatible when I came back from the Army, but that was Windows 3.11
Yeah.
at the time, and it like going from DOS to Windows, it like stopped productivity if you knew what you were doing with your computer. It like slowed down productivity like 10 times or something because you could like type multiple commands in DOS on one line, brum, enter. Whereas like Windows 3.11, you'd have to point click, wait,
Yeah.
point click, wait to do the same thing. And so I didn't like Windows from the very beginning.
Yeah, and
And
that makes sense. I mean, honestly, like even today, you can do uh, the majority of stuff you can do in the console a lot faster, unless of course you're editing. I mean, editing video even if you're doing something simple, there's with something with like a FFmpeg or something like that, which I actually use a lot to do file conversion.
right.
Instead of opening up some like Kdenlive Live and doing it that way, just using
I
FFmpeg
just
to convert.
I just use Handbrake, which is basically a front end for FFM MPEG.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good. Honestly don't use that a lot. I have used it before. I think I used it to copy some videos over for my kids. They had some like cartoon videos. Um, oh, one question I was going to ask you this because I was kind of because I'm not really familiar with the controllers on the Commodore 64. Was it like basically if you could interface with the pin connector and was it a proprietary pin connector for the controller?
It was like a D sub, and like I said, it's the
Oh,
same
okay.
connector the Atari 2600 had.
Okay. But if you
So
could,
Atari 2600 joysticks just plugged right into it.
okay. But basically, if you could, close the, like finish the connection there on those, then you would have a
Yeah,
usable input.
right. And they weren't
Okay.
analog sticks. The
Okay.
board, the little Atari joystick board, had four. It was basically four buttons on the board, and one button that the joystick pressed, and then your fire button, and that was it.
Well, you had told me also that you did some modification, like some custom controllers for even stuff that worked on GamePort.
No,
Oh no.
what
Okay.
what happened there? What happened there is I had a Panther XL,
Okay.
and I think that was in the days of Windows 98, and then finally I built an XP machine, and the game port was gone, and so the Panther XL wasn't useful anymore, and it sat in a closet for a long, long time, and I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah.
And then
No, go
and then
ahead. Sorry.
and then years and years and years go by, and I keep looking for because they were Mad Cats was they had even made prototypes. They were going to come out with the Panther XL Pro. It was a USB version of the Panther XL, and they even went so far as to have the Chinese company they had make all their stuff make prototypes. And I don't know what happened, but they just didn't make them
Man, that's disappointing. Like,
anymore.
yeah. What the Panther
And
X? I think you'd sent me some pictures of that. It was basically like it had a joystick, but it also had buttons and like wheels and all kinds of stuff on it. Is that the right one?
well, it was a it was a joystick trackball game controller, and
Yeah.
you trackball looked with your left hand, and you had the joystick in your right hand. And it might seem weird to have the joystick in your left hand or the trackball in your left hand, and it is weird if you just have the trackball on your left hand if you're a right-handed person. But once you stick that joystick in your right hand, the trackball in the left hand was just totally natural. And it had like a little slider for throttle because it was basically a flight stick style stick. And I think they claimed 18 buttons, but 8 of those buttons were two four-way hats. And so it had a pinky button in front of the trigger, your normal trigger, a trigger on top of the stick, two four-way hats, and then in the trackball area, you had your standard 3 buttons where your fingers would be, and then 2 buttons where your thumb would be. So the my custom game controller was patterned directly after the Panther XL.
Yeah, and that's your is that not your photo that you have on your social media
Yes, it
accounts?
is.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome that you made that. It's just so
It was
cool.
a it was more of a it was more of a concept to see if I was actually capable of doing it, and it's not usable now. It's like fell apart. Like I had to add wires to the stick to interface with the Arduino, and I made poor choices in wires, and so the wires broke under the bending. And then I used junk to make the thing. I went to the computer store and I got an old Apple mouse for like $2 or something, because it had the sensor I was looking for in it, because there was already some sample code for that sensor on the internet. But that's what I got, this little Logitech TrackMan, and just trackballs just got ridiculous, and they seem to have come down now. But they was everything with like a big 2.5-inch ball was like over $100.
Yeah, no, I noticed that. Like, I think most of them were like 130 or more.
And I was like, what the heck? If I'm going to do that, I might as well see if I can make my own. So I started searching the internet for people that had made custom trackballs, and I just went for it.
You could always just turn a mouse upside down, that has the ball in it. I'm kidding. Like tiny little, the tiny mouse ball that's in there.
And my first test to see if it would work is I bought some deodorant that had the roller ball.
Yeah.
And I cut that off and set that on top of the mouse sensor, and went into X input, because I had to reverse one of the axes. And it's like, okay, this is doable. And I just started researching more. But was it way back in, like, I'm going to guess like 2004, 2005, trackballs pretty much disappeared. And the last one I bought, I went to the local computer shop and asked about it. And this guy brought one out from the back room that was in a bin that was basically junk, and it was exactly what I was looking for: a nice big ball, 3 buttons where your fingertips are, and there you go. And it was cheap, because and then all of a sudden you can't hardly get trackballs anymore, or they're super expensive.
Yeah.
And I'm like a 5-year-old on a mouse. Like, I grew up with like Missile Command and I grew up with trackballs and these like little Xbox controllers. No, I grew up with like big giant controllers, like,
Yeah, like arcade style, right?
Arcade style stuff.
Like, I know, like arcade machines, they got that big heavy. It looks like a something off a pool table, right?
Yeah, it's the same size. And like the golf games even have those are like 2.5-inch balls, and then like your golf games have big old 3-inch balls.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That's like the complaint I have with the Logitech, the little Logitech one I'm using now. You the ball, you move the ball with your fingertips, and the buttons are in a horrible position. And I like the big balls that you palm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one of those. Honestly, not for like consumer computers. I mean,
I think the last time I actually saw one in a computer store was like probably 15 years ago, at least.
Yeah.
And then even trying to get this little TrackMan, you'd look up on the internet and see what stores carried them, and then you'd actually go to the store to try to pick one up, and they didn't have them in stock. And I was like, okay, but so I'd like go around to 3 stores, and finally I got this like Logitech one, the cheap $30 one.
Well, you mentioned when you were talking about changing one of the axes in X input, and that reminded me. I want to ask you about your history, like with Linux. Like, how did you get started going from like I don't know? You said Windows XP into Linux. Like, how did that come about?
Well, it was around 2012, and even though XP was the first time I ever liked Windows in the whole history of going from 3.11 to Windows 95 to 98 to XP, and XP Service Pack 2. I was like, oh, right, this is good. And then Service Pack 3, it's like Service Pack 3 came out, and all of a sudden my computers ran like pond water. Pond water don't move. And so I was mad at Windows again. And then they announced they were dropping support for XP. And at that point, a friend of mine was running Linux Mint. And I knew a guy that had used Linux before, back when Red Hat was on the shelves in Walmart. And his pain point was he wasn't going to upgrade from Windows 95 to Windows 98, and that was his pain point to switch into Linux. But at that point, I liked XP. But so anyway, this guy I know had a computer with Linux Mint XFCE edition on it, and I played around on it, and I was like, well, hell, this is just like Windows XP, but better. It's like what I wanted XP to do, and I went to Linux, started with Ubuntu 12.04, and never looked back.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy. A lot of the because with free or open source software, however you want to say it. Um, even, and I should clarify, there is a difference between the two, but um, basically, yeah, it's cool because there's so many innovations that happen and so many desktops, and they just continue on. If somebody takes the effort to actually maintain them. I don't. Have you tried a Trinity desktop?
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
it's just beautiful because
And if I
yeah.
I tried a PC Linux OS Trinity
Yes, yeah, I did too.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
if all my laptops wouldn't have burned themselves up, I'd probably still have it on one.
yeah, it's
But I
just
did
it's
all
so nice.
but I probably got all my distro hopping done by like Ubuntu 14.04, because back I tried Sabian, which was I think a Gentoo base. I tried Fedora, and I don't remember why, but I actually liked Sabian better than Fedora for some reason.
Was
And
that
who
the
knows what I tried.
was that the one where they was that Enlightenment desktop? Am I thinking of the right one or
I I can't remember. It was so long ago.
Oh, I'm thinking of Bodhi, I think Sabian there was Plasma or it was KDE4, I think. I don't know. I can't remember. But I know there was one of those. I think I just got those two confused, but
And then
anyway, yeah.
when 16.04 came around, I actually installed Ubuntu proper and just installed the XFCE desktop environment because I had been running into issues, which I think is not much of an issue anymore. But back in 12.04, Xubuntu was a lot smaller than Ubuntu, and then you do something that was supposed to work on Ubuntu, and you'd have to figure out what packages were missing on Xubuntu that Ubuntu had, and so there weren't very many pain points in the switch though. But there was every now and then something would come up, and I didn't like Unity at first, which is why I installed XFCE on it. But I had all the full Ubuntu packages, not something stripped down for Xubuntu. And I gave Unity a chance. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it a chance. And I gave it like 2 weeks of not going into XFCE, and I actually liked it. And then they decided to drop Unity.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, a lot of people complained about Unity, but
I did it first. I
yeah,
mean, and it's probably somewhere on the internet somewhere. You can probably see a comment on one of my comments from somewhere around the Ubuntu 14.04 era. It's like I said something along the lines, if I wanted a tablet OS, I'd get a tablet.
yeah.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I
No, it's
if
true. That
anyone
was my thought too. It's like this interface
but
is obviously meant for touch, and it was just weird to see. But eventually, actually, I liked
but
it.
then
It wasn't bad actually.
once you got in it for a couple weeks, you realized how keyboard centric it was, and I was wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And I always appreciated the multi-monitor support. Somehow, Unity really nailed that part of it, and I thought that was something pretty good
You know, and
progress.
then, and it's something, the window buttons being over there on the left hand side, it looked
Yeah,
weird,
yeah.
but everything else is on the left hand side. So why are you going to drag that cursor all the way over to the right to mess with those window buttons when that's the only thing over there?
Yeah.
It looked weird, but it actually made sense.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way about the like the HUD views or whatever. I'm not sure what you call it.
Well,
Is
the
that
HUD was great. If you
yeah,
didn't know, the HUD was great. If you didn't know, like you got all these menus and you don't know what's menus it in, and you type
yeah,
type
yep,
crop. Like if you're in GIMP, you type crop and it show you
Yep, that's true.
where it was in the drop down menus is like, it was good stuff.
Yeah, I remember Rosa and Mandriva, when they did their 2011 launch, they had the Rosa launcher, and it was basically like that kind of a thing, like a HUD and like search and all this stuff. And I was like, "What? This is horrible." But but I mean, yeah, it's very useful. I mean, Plasma is something I like about, because I'm a Plasma guy. But if you're just on the desktop and you start typing, a little search box pops up, and it just brings
Right.
whatever program you're typing, it just brings it down. It's pretty handy. But I mean, it kind of goes along with that. You know, the search is, or typing is so much faster than clicking around through stuff. Kind of goes back to your point about DOS to Windows. You know?
With Plasma, I just don't stop messing with it. I keep messing with the settings, trying to get it the way I want it, and then I don't know where that setting was to put it back if I didn't like something, and then I'm finally, you know what? I'm trying to just make this more like XFCE. I'm going to go back to XFCE.
Yeah. No, I think that's the biggest complaint about Plasma. There's too many. It's always been that way with KDE. There's just too many configurations. It's just all over the
Where
place.
where XFCE, if you want to change something, right click on what you want to change, and you don't have to like look through menus or something. It's something right there. Like you want to change the panel, right click on the panel, and there's the menu to do for panel preferences. Right click on the desktop. There's the menu to change desktop preferences. You don't even have to.
Yeah.
It's like the set. You don't have to look for settings. You just right click what you want to change, and boom, there they are.
Yeah, that's the way it should. That's the way it should work. So I have a question. I've been asking everybody this. It's about your opinion, because I've heard, and I haven't included this part when I've asked everybody, but some people are saying that the Linux desktop experience, not mobile, not server, but the desktop experience has become a bit boring. And I wanted to get your opinion on your thoughts on the state of the Linux desktop today.
Why is it boring? It's because it doesn't break and don't have to fix stuff no more. No, it's I don't get that.
So it's okay. That's good.
Or maybe they've
Yeah.
made all the innovations and they're slowing down now because they've already
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, I kind of feel that
I
way.
don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I don't know. I think it seems like, I don't know. I think maybe you're right. Maybe it's just kind of a slowdown from what it, has been in the past, where it's just like, this is new, this is new, this is new. And, because I mean, I think about, like, when KDE4 came out, it was just disastrous, but then it was good. And same with Unity. It was just like, this is horrible, and then it was good. But it was always like some kind of innovation
Right.
that was going on. And it seems like, like you said, it's very stable. And I think, that's, of course, the aim for a lot of projects. Especially, you look at something like Elementary OS, and their whole ecosystem that they've built. I mean, that's super stable kind of ecosystem to aim for. So I don't know. That's just an opinion that's out there, that it's boring. I just want to get your your thoughts on it.
I
But
guess it's boring to some people if they don't have to fix stuff. I don't know. I don't get it.
yeah, yeah, I think that's what it is. It's like, this is too easy. It just works. So, what other topics do you want to talk about? Because I know I haven't thought of everything. What's some other stuff that you're into that you want to talk about?
Um,
Oh,
I don't know.
I completely forgot. What am I doing here? I completely forgot to mention your gaming, because I watch your gaming all the time, and you do these, like, like whole series. Like, you'll go through the entire game and play through it.
Yeah, I
And
got a bunch. I got a couple I got to catch up on.
did you?
But
Sorry, go ahead.
so anyway, when I started making YouTube videos, I just had this Pentium laptop and a phone internet connection. And I saw all these Linux gaming videos, and they're all on like these fancy desktops with these multi-core CPUs and fancy graphics card. And I'm just sitting here with this crappy little Pentium, and I just started uploading stuff. It was like, no, this is because I didn't see people making videos on crap hardware. And so I started out. I'd make a video with like simple screen recorder. I'm not going to try editing on that Pentium, and upload it on the phone. And I finally figured out I could like live stream on the poor thing at like 940 by 550 when I finally got internet out here. And even if the internet would keep up, the CPU couldn't keep up with more than that. And I just upped my game with a good internet connection, at least for out where I'm at, and a little better hardware. But I figure it's still low spec as far as gamers are concerned because both machines are APUs. They're not like a CPU and a GPU.
Yeah, I mean it's brilliant. It's a whole missed area of Linux users. You know, the low end hardware, because I mean that's really like that's always been the big selling point of Linux. You know, you can put it on your old hardware and it's going to run super fast, and you know it's going to be like a brand new machine. But yeah, there's a lot of people gaming out there. I used to game on some real low end stuff. I didn't get into anything like higher end, like modern, until like I think 2017 or so.
And even that old Pentium, it ran the desktop faster than my friend's machine with Windows 10 with a multi-core processor. It had a graphics card in it, and you'd go in there and you'd open the file manager up and you'd just watch the wheel spin. And it's like, and Windows like has to ask. You have to ask Windows, Mother May I, before it'll actually do anything. It's like, why is it taking so long just for the file manager to pop up?
Yeah, no. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Another thing that bugged me about Windows 10, it's like, as far as ease of use, XFCE anyway, it's like way easier than Windows 10. Because I was on the machine one time and they got that search bar next to the home button. And I don't know if this is still the same way. So I was clicking in that search bar and trying to type, and it wouldn't work. And I'd click in the search bar and trying to type, and then you'd hit the start button, and all of a sudden the search bar was useful. But if you didn't hit the start button, there'd be this search bar there that wasn't usable. Well, if you can't use it, why are they showing it to me? And it just drives me nuts. It's like,
yeah,
I don't get it. People
That's
that
horrible.
think Windows is an easier user interface, I don't get that.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And when I've worked on systems for family that use Windows products, you know, it's just like you said, like every little thing you want to do, it's like, are you sure you want to do that? It's like, why would I want to do that? Why would I tell you to do that if I didn't want to do that? And
why is it sitting there spinning? All I did was open up the file manager.
Yeah. And I think a lot of I'm not sure how they're managing their file system, but I remember when I used to use Windows that the file system would just throw data all over the disk, and then if you wanted your disk to work properly, you had to defragment. And
you had to defrag all the time
and put everything in a linear space so that you didn't have data all over the place. It's just insanity. I mean, I guess it's fast. I mean, kind of like I don't know. I don't know what the point is. Maybe it's kind of like RAID or something. Is that the mentality?
Know.
I don't either. But it just wrecks it. It's so slow.
I don't know. I remember one time I was installing and uninstalling and installing and uninstalling a lot of stuff on my machine, and so I looked up on and I don't remember the command because there's no reason to. I looked up for the command to check the fragmentation of the disk. And I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff that on Windows would have just had it fragmented all over the place. And it was like 0.04% fragmented or something. I'm like, well, hell, this extension 4 file system, it just don't fragment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. Have you ever experimented with any of the other file systems that are out there?
I haven't.
No, I don't either. I'm like, if it works, I'm using it.
Yeah.
I think I used what it would have been, maybe XFS something. I think it was on one of the distros I used, but like I didn't install it; it just came with it. So I'm like,
you're right, and it works. So why change it?
Exactly, unless you're doing something that requires something specific like copy and write or something like that. If you're doing server stuff or whatever, I guess then you might want to change it out, but. So yeah, we were talking about, before we started the recording, we were talking about graphics card process costs, and you had mentioned looking for the what was it, the RX 580?
Yeah, I was like, well, part of it is I'm an off-grid solar situation, so I don't want one of those new fancy graphics card that takes like 300 watts just for the graphics card. So like back around December or so, I was looking at RX 570s, and then the difference in price between an RX 570 and an RX 580, 8 gig, was like $20. So it's like, well, why get an RX 570 then? And it was under $200. And then like a month or 2 months ago, all of a sudden an RX 580 is $800, and I think they're down to 700 now. And I'm just like, it's still $500 too expensive for an RX 580.
Yeah, it's
And
just
so
insane.
I paid way over. I paid way too much for the 3400G because it's supposed to be and it was $150 processor back in December. But when I got mine, it was going back and forth between 275 and 300, and I snagged it when it was at 285. The
My goodness.
3400G for the desktop. It's like over $100 over
Yeah.
what MSRP. But compared to the price of a graphics card, I was like happy.
Right. I can, so you said that you're in the process, or you've already completed that build for the
Yeah,
34.
yeah, it's sitting here. I don't run it much. I can run it all afternoon and charge batteries at the same time.
Cool.
And if I like run it for a couple hours at night, if there haven't been cloudy days, my solar system stays up. But
So how many?
it's
Go ahead.
mostly just the laptop because I run the laptop pretty much 24/7
Well, I was going to ask
with
you,
what I've got for solar now.
how many solar panels do you have in your array, and like how many? I guess assume you use like deep cycle RV batteries for your backups, or do you use like proper solar or whatever batteries?
I've got these cheap. They were like $120 each new. I got two of those, and then I got two of the same thing that were $100 refurbished. And they're about the size of golf cart batteries, but they're 12-volt solar batteries. And it's a temporary system. The bank's sitting in my living room right now, and in the end all be all things, they'll be in a separate room in the back of the kitchen with all the systems, the electrical system and the water and everything will end up being in a systems room behind the kitchen, which I still have to pound tires for. I probably got about half of those pounded, and I just haven't felt like doing it. And I'm still working on right now. I'm putting pumice-crete on the concrete dome for insulation.
So
Is what I'm working.
can you like I'm curious about like your electrical setup. Like how like what all do you have? I assume you're doing like uh I don't know. I can make assumptions, but just tell me. I want to know. I want to know how
I've
your
got like
electrical system works.
I've got like two old I got two old cheap 100-watt panels that are going to a cheap Chinese charge controller, and I just got a 240-watt panel. Um, which there's a wholesaler in town, and this 240-watt panel, which is used, but it's only $50. Solar has gotten so cheap. The batteries are still expensive, but the
Yeah,
solar
yeah.
system, and I got a charge controller kit instead of a charge controller, and you have to put your own heat sink on it. And so there's six MOSFETs that this heat sink makes contact with, but they have to be electrically isolated with each other. And so I ordered the thermal pads for it, and I'm still waiting on them to come from the slow boat from China
Yeah.
so I can slap. And so right now for the 240-watt panel, I'm like manually connecting it, and then once the power's up to a certain point, I manually disconnect it while I'm waiting for thermal pads
Yeah, always
to
like
finish
when I
putting the
see
charge controller together
oh,
for that panel.
sorry. I keep talking over you. I don't mean to. I was going to say when I see like if something's shipped China post, I'm like, "Oh, 40 days from now I'll have that." That's usually
Right.
how long it takes. So what about your like how what do you use to convert your power? Are you using like power inverters?
Yeah, I got like just a cheap modified square wave 1200-watt inverter, I think it is at the moment.
Right.
Um, in the end all be all of things, I'd really like to go to a 24-volt system and get like a 3600-watt true sine inverter, because I do end up wanting to run shop tools.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's so cool that you can like. I would have had no idea that you were able to get like that much use out of your setup there. Because I mean, you game and stream and do all this stuff, and so like I didn't know. I was wondering how you were powering it. I kind of had in my mind some like massive array. You know what I mean? Like you see, like at like I used to work at this facility, and they had literally like bank every 3 years they would have to replace it. It was like 2,400 batteries or something.
Oh well, think that's another thing. Is like you design as much as possible to not have to use electricity. So I don't have like big old fans to run for heating and air conditioning or any of that. I'll end up having passive air conditioning, and then in the wintertime, the greenhouse is your heater, and the like you got 30 or 29-inch thick rammed earth walls that are basically a battery for temperature. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
and
So
so it eventually it'll stay a stable temperature.
yeah, I saw some. I watched a documentary. It explained a little bit about like the Earthship and about the cool air intake or something, and like a venting from the top and brings it in from the, I guess, from below. Is that basically
Well,
kind of?
I've got tunnels that I'm gonna build that will be buried into the berm. So they'll be 6 foot, 5, 6 foot underground, and I'll have it, with doors. And then so you open the skylight, hot air goes out, and open one of those tunnels, and the air gets cooled to like cave temperature and comes blasting in the room, all powered by convection.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because the heat wants to escape, so it has to pull the cool air in. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, right on. Science, right?
Yep.
That's so cool.
Low low tech.
Yeah, no, but
I'm
it's
into
awesome.
I'm also into like pre-1920 technology, and it'll surprise you what we could do back then, and it also kind of piss you off because prior to 1900, we had all fossil fuels were already obsolete. We had all the technology we needed prior to 1900 to switch to a hydrogen economy.
Yeah, explain more. I'm interested now.
Um, they already had, making it's easy, of course. It does take electricity. Um, as far as making it as far as changing the burn rate so that it'll run a normal internal combustion engine. There's several ways to do that, and in back before 1900, they would just bubble it through some turpentine, and blammo, it burns like a hydrocarbon instead of hydrogen, the HHO. Because unless you're separating the hydrogen from the oxygen, and that's the dangerous part. If the hydrogen by itself is safe, but once it's combined with oxygen, that's it's highly explosive and dangerous.
Wow. So you're saying that the what was the source they were using? Were they taking water and separating hydrogen and oxygen? Is that the tech they were
Yeah,
doing? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So based on water.
And then
Yeah.
right, and basically they'd make and there's this one guy he'd made batteries, and like the zinc would get consumed, and so you'd get electricity and hydrogen oxygen gas from the same contraption. And so you use the electricity you're getting off of your contraption to run the spark plugs and all that, and add carbon somehow to the hydrogen oxygen mixture, and just run And this was like way back 1890 something. This was all figured out.
Wow, that's crazy.
How to adjust the burn rate and everything. And nowadays we've learned that we can use nitrogen to adjust the burn rate. And so instead of burning hydrocarbons, we could burn hydronitrogen.
So,
and
yeah. Have you done anything like? Have you done any like experimentation with this kind of tech and tried to make any contraptions to use?
Yes,
to
I
utilize
have.
Have you
Yes,
had?
I have.
Have you had any luck with it?
Yes, I have.
Wow.
I've had a Toyota 22R engine running on hydrogen on oxygen and ionized air, or maybe not ionized air. I'm not sure if the air was ionizing or not, but I was drawing the air for the engine through the cell also. And I ran that engine. It almost at an idle, but it didn't die either. It was running, and it was turning the alternator fast enough to keep the battery up. And it ran for like 45 minutes until one of my cells finally broke down. And that was a long time ago, and I'd like to get back into that, but I just got too much on my plate, and it's expensive. Free energy research isn't free; it's expensive.
That's funny. So, man, that's crazy.
But
yeah,
people want to say you're breaking the law of thermodynamics, but what they don't understand is like even with a gasoline engine, the gasoline, your 13-to-1 fuel to air ratio. Well, that's only 7%. The actual gasoline, the fuel, is only like 7% of your actual total mixture. And with hydrogen, according to NASA, it's got 2.5 times more power than gasoline, and so you need even less than 7% of your total mixture, and then you're using the nitrogen that you just get from plain old air to adjust the burn rate, and so yeah, if you had to like use electricity to make 100% of your final fuel mixture, yeah, you're breaking the law of thermodynamics, but you only need to make less than 7% of your entire fuel air mixture. And so if you do research, the first water car was back in 1916, 1917, and the guy, and it's in the Electrical Experimenter magazine, and the guy even goes through the math of how much electricity it takes to make the hydrogen, how much air and fuel the engine draws in, and this, that, and the other. And so it's horrible. I don't necessarily believe in global warming. I think that's all controlled by the sun, and we can't do nothing about it, but we shouldn't be poisoning ourselves to death.
Yeah, I don't think we should be poisoning ourselves either. So, do you know like what?
I mean, I believe in climate change. There's nothing you can do about it. I think it's mostly controlled by the sun. Well, and what little bit we affect it, it's like we think we're more powerful than we are. I'm sorry, you can't compete with the power of the sun.
I'm just curious about why like in your research why did this technology not become more dominant against oil?
Well, oil was cheap back then. Who cares?
Yeah. Okay. And this was a big investment into research and all that, and development and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's still cool. So you actually had a car. It was running on this tech, and you just poured water into it to run it?
Basically.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's really that is cool.
I was using baking soda as my electrolyte because I was using electrolysis to make the hydrogen. I've also experimented with putting together some of Stan Meyer's circuits, and there you're using high voltage, low amps instead of. So you're using static electricity to make the hydrogen instead of current, and I've been successful at that.
So it's some kind of is that the process of actually breaking down
separating the water into its hydrogen and oxygen.
Okay, and that's an electrical process. What I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, is there any you got anything else awesome like that? Because I had no idea you were into that stuff. That is so cool.
Red light therapy.
Okay, well, I've never heard of this. What is this?
It's 660 nanometers, and originally the research came out of NASA because they were using 660 nanometer red light to, they were doing research on growing plants in space, and they found out that it improved, it sped healing on humans, and so research started going into that, and it actually like energizes the mitochondria of the cells. So like the red light is a beneficial light as opposed to blue light is a destructive light.
So are these like naturally? Is this like naturally occurring light or something
Yes, but
synthesized light?
well, it's naturally occurring, but the 660 nanometers, that's the wavelength of the light, and your blue that NASA would use for growing plants, I think, is somewhere around 440 nanometers, and then you get lower than that, and you get into ultraviolet, and so it's just the frequency of that particular color.
And are you doing like laser experiments to test this stuff out, or?
No, but it takes care of my lower back pain.
Okay, so you have like some kind of red
Yeah,
light device.
I got a red light device. That's got a 5 watt, 660 nanometer LED that blinks, and um, I stick that on my back for 5 minutes, and it actually reduces swelling, and it promotes healing, and I use it for pain relief.
I've never heard of that. That's amazing. So it's a
I have
NASA.
a
Yeah. Sorry.
I have a NASA study on it, but there's a whole bunch of other studies on it, and there's also a lot of esoteric BS about it if you look it up also. But it's been useful to me.
Very cool.
I think I think they finally got FDA approval for it to like regrow hair or something.
Huh. Really? Yeah.
But one of the I ought to send you a link to the NASA study I have, because one of the things they did is they had special forces guys with injuries and range of motion problems that were supposedly they were going to never heal and going to have for the rest of their life, and they were able to restore range of motion to these people. And some of the first studies they did were on cancer patients to heal sores and stuff on cancer patients, and the Navy did experiments on them, and basically for submarine use to speed healing because they're not exposed to sunlight down in a submarine.
Okay. So why isn't this technology more, out there? I mean, or is it? Is it just something I don't know about?
It is.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It is if you do your own research, but the pharmaceutical companies don't make no money off of that.
Okay. That's fair. Okay.
I mean, what I think I paid $15 for 5 of those 5 watt 660 nanometer LEDs from China, and made my own driver for it. So I got like $20 into this device, and then you can buy stuff like it on the internet, but they want stupid amounts of cash for it, like $500 device. Now there is a guy that sells a device, basically the same device I use, but actually nice and in a nice aluminum case and stuff, for 140 or 150 bucks, which, like I say, I got $20 in this thing, but if I was going to build it and pay myself, I'm just going to go tell him to go buy that guy's device, if he still has them in stock, which I don't know.
Are there any like medical reasons or drawbacks to the tech that you know of?
I don't know of any drawbacks to it.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have to look into it.
Chiropractors use it. And of course, like the guy the guy I know, he took his $150 device to his chiropractor, and his chiropractor has a $5,000 device. And the chiropractor told him, this thing works just as good as my $5,000 device.
Wow.
So even when they do commercialize it, it's overpriced ridiculousness.
Yeah. It kind of prices a lot of people out of it, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, send me that study. Send me the NASA study. That sounds really cool.
And if you can read Russian, there's a whole.
Well, actually, I can read Cyrillic, but I don't speak Russian, so I don't really understand it. But I learned the alphabet, like reading and writing. That's as far as I got.
There's a whole bunch of Russian scientific studies on it, because they was actually looking for cheap ways to heal poor people. Where here we're just the pharmaceutical companies are just how much money can we make off of everything?
Yeah, there's big business to be made, at least in a lot of medical areas. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what, Jeff? I think we better call it here. Almost at an hour, so I want to make sure I can post this everywhere, and I've got like hour limitations on some of the places I post.
Right.
So I want to make sure I get to post it everywhere. But thanks for being on with me tonight. It was fun, interesting.
Thank you. I'll bet this is different than most of the topics, the last part of this, than you get.
No, yeah, that's good, because it's interesting. That's what I'm all about interesting. So, all right, we'll talk to you later, Jeff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll send you that link to the one study I went ahead and saved on my Google Drive.
Yes, sir. Sounds good. If you enjoyed this episode, you can join me on Locals at librequest.locals.com, where I'll be posting exclusive interviews, some of my music, and other things, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about as well. For other ways to support me, you can visit librequest.org, that's librequest.org, and thank you for being a listener. Until next time, I'm Matt, and this is LibreQuest.